7 years ago, I was just Tiff, a 24-year-old with a wild heart and a passion for adventure. I was a tour guide, leading groups through breathtaking landscapes, my eyes always on the horizon, dreaming of exploring every corner of the world. Then I met David. He was older, successful, a lawyer with a sharp mind and an even sharper suit. He was charming, witty, and swept me off my feet with promises of a life filled with love and excitement. We fell hard and fast, married within a year, and I truly believed I had found my happily ever after. One evening, over a candlelit dinner, David announced he had received a job offer from a prestigious law firm in a bustling city a few hours away. It was a fantastic opportunity, a chance to climb the career ladder and reach his full potential. I was thrilled for him, of course, but a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Leaving my job, my friends, the life I had built, filled me with a sense of dread. But I loved David, and I wanted to support his dreams, so I pushed my own anxieties aside and plastered on a smile. We moved to a beautiful, spacious house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. Initially, it was exciting. Everything felt new and full of possibilities. We spent our weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and attending fancy events. But as the weeks turned into months, a subtle shift occurred in David's demeanor. He became more demanding, less patient, and the charming facade began to crack. One day, as I was unpacking boxes in our still somewhat chaotic living room, David snapped at me. "Tiff, can you work any slower? I can't stand living in this mess." His words stung, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. This wasn't the man I married. I brushed it off, attributing his irritability to the stress of his new job and the pressures of settling into a new city. But things didn't improve. Finding a new job in this unfamiliar place proved more challenging than I anticipated. I considered going back to tour guiding, but David scoffed at the idea. "Tiff, you need to focus on managing our home. A lawyer's wife can't be gallivanting around with tourists." His tone was dismissive, and I felt a pang of resentment. This wasn't the partnership I had envisioned. As time went on, finding a job became a distant dream. Every attempt I made was met with criticism or indifference from David. "Your job is to make everything perfect for me," he declared one evening, his voice laced with a chilling authority. I nodded, swallowing my tears, missing the independent woman I used to be, the woman who scaled mountains and navigated foreign cities with a map and a backpack. Months blurred into years, and my life became a monotonous cycle of cooking, cleaning, and catering to David's every whim. His demands grew with his career, his temper flaring at the slightest inconvenience. Suggesting a housekeeper was met with an explosive rant about wasting money and how my place was to be the perfect housewife. I felt suffocated, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making. I tried to be the perfect wife, hoping to rekindle the spark we once shared. I meticulously planned dinner parties, learned to cook gourmet meals, and even became his unofficial social media manager, crafting the image of a successful, happy couple for the world to see. But behind the carefully curated online persona, the reality was starkly different. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, David stormed in, his face contorted with anger. "Shut up and get my food ready," he barked. I served him with trembling hands, but he took one look at the meal and shoved the plate away in disgust. "What is this? Start over!" he yelled, the veins in his neck bulging. I stood there, frozen, as he stormed off, leaving me to clean up the mess and the shattered remnants of my self-worth. Another night, I was scrubbing the kitchen floor at 2 a.m., tears streaming down my face, while David paced behind me, criticizing my every move. "You missed a spot. Are you even trying?" he sneered. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, my spirit slowly eroding under the weight of his constant disapproval. One day, as I was gathering the shattered pieces of a vase David had hurled against the wall in a fit of rage, a realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I was living a nightmare. This wasn't the life I had dreamed of, the life I deserved. I had become a shadow of my former self, a ghost haunting the halls of our opulent prison. The next morning I found my voice. As David was getting ready for work, I stood before him, my hands trembling, but my gaze steady. "David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." His reaction was chilling. A cruel smile twisted his lips, and his eyes gleamed with malice. "A divorce?" he chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Listen carefully, Tiff. If you leave me, I'll ruin you. You'll have nothing. No money, no reputation, no friends. You'll end up on the streets, begging for scraps." His words pierced me like daggers, but a flicker of defiance ignited within me. Fear warred with a newfound determination. I might be broken, but I wasn't defeated. I wouldn't let him control me any longer. That day, a seed of rebellion was planted. I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. But I knew I had to start planning my escape. I began documenting everything. I secretly recorded our conversations, saved his abusive messages, and kept a detailed journal of every incident. I needed evidence, a lifeline to pull me out of this abyss. Meanwhile, David's career continued to soar. He won a high-profile case and decided to celebrate with a lavish party at our house. I was tasked with organizing the entire event, from the menu to the decorations. For days I slaved away, cleaning, cooking, and ensuring everything was perfect for his important guests. On the night of the party, I was exhausted, my body aching, my mind numb. David came home early with a bottle of wine. "Here," he said, handing me a glass. "You look like you could use this." I took a sip, the wine tasting strangely bitter, but I attributed it to my fatigue. He barely touched his own glass. "Go change," he instructed. "The guests will be arriving soon." As I climbed the stairs, a wave of dizziness washed over me. By the time I reached our bedroom, the room was spinning, and I collapsed onto the bed, darkness engulfing me. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and a sense of disorientation. Downstairs, I found David's mother, Martha, in the kitchen, her face etched with disapproval. Well, look who finally decided to join us," she sneered. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Confused, I asked what had happened. "You got drunk and made a fool of my son in front of all his colleagues," Martha spat, her voice dripping with venom. "He had to call me to entertain his guests because his wife was too inebriated to stand." "No, that's not possible," I protested, my stomach churning. "I only had one glass of wine." "Don't bother with excuses," Martha snapped, cutting me off. "I've always known you weren't right for my David. Now everyone sees what a mess you are." As she continued to berate me, the pieces of the previous night began to fall into place. The strange taste of the wine, David barely touching his glass, the sudden dizziness. "He drugged me," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. David was systematically undermining my credibility, making me appear unstable and unreliable. If I left him now, who would believe my story? That day, my resolve hardened. I bought a new phone and hid it, determined to gather more evidence. I would expose him for the monster he truly was. My new phone became my silent witness, capturing every instance of David's abuse. His drunken outbursts, his late-night cleaning orders, every harsh word, every threat, all meticulously recorded and stored away. One recording in particular stood out, a painful reminder of my shattered self-worth. It was my birthday. I had prepared a special dinner, clinging to a faint hope for a peaceful evening. David arrived late, reeking of alcohol. As he stumbled into the kitchen, I pressed record on my hidden phone. "What's all this?" he slurred, eyeing the carefully set table. "It's my birthday, David. I made dinner," I responded softly. He let out a cruel laugh. "Your birthday? Who cares? Look at you. You don't deserve a celebration." His words stung, but I continued recording as he launched into a tirade, culminating in him sweeping the plates off the table, sending food splattering across the freshly cleaned floor. Another night, captured in chilling detail by my hidden phone, David woke me up at 3 a.m. "Get up," he hissed, yanking the blankets off me. "The house is filthy. Clean it. Now." For hours, I scrubbed every surface while he followed me around, criticizing my every move. My phone recorded it all, documenting his relentless demands and my weary compliance. These recordings became my secret arsenal, concrete proof of the torment I endured. I felt a sense of empowerment. knowing I was building a case against him, a way out of this suffocating reality. Despite my efforts to document his abuse, I maintained the facade of a devoted wife in public. I attended social events with David, plastered a smile on my face, and endured the pitying glances and whispered gossip of his colleagues and friends. They saw a successful lawyer, with a beautiful wife, oblivious to the darkness lurking beneath the surface. Our wedding anniversary was approaching, and despite everything, a flicker of hope remained within me. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point in our relationship. But deep down, I knew better. On the anniversary evening, David came home in high spirits. "I've reserved a table at the finest restaurant in town," he announced, beaming. "Let's celebrate." I hesitated, my gut screaming at me to refuse, but I agreed. Before we left, David offered me a glass of lemonade he had prepared himself. His smile was unsettling, his eyes holding a glint of something sinister. My intuition screamed at me to be cautious. I pretended to sip the drink, but discreetly poured it into a nearby plant when he stepped away to answer a phone call. As we drove, a wave of drowsiness washed over me. I fought against the heaviness of my eyelids, but soon I was succumbing to the familiar sensation of being drugged. This time, however, I had no idea where he was taking me, and the fear was palpable. Through blurred vision, I saw David dragging me out of the car. We were in a desolate part of town, dimly lit and eerily quiet. "This is where you belong," he sneered, tossing my purse into the darkness before speeding away, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. Panic surged through me. I was alone, disoriented, and vulnerable. The sound of distant sirens only amplified my fear, but amidst the terror, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I wouldn't let him break me. I would survive this. Spotting the flickering neon sign of a convenience store in the distance, I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst through the door, startling the young woman behind the counter. "Please," I gasped. "I need help. Can I use your phone?" The woman, Maya, eyed me with a mixture of concern and suspicion, but quickly ushered me inside, locking the door behind me. She handed me her phone, and with trembling fingers I dialed my friend Sarah's number. "Sarah, it's Tiff," I choked out. "David left me. I don't know where I am. I need help." Sarah's voice was filled with alarm, but she quickly calmed me down and assured me she was on her way. As I waited, Maya's kindness was a beacon of hope in the darkness. She offered me a warm drink and a comforting presence, sharing stories of her own struggles to distract me from my fear. When Sarah arrived, I tried to give Maya the expensive ring David had given me as a token of my gratitude, but she refused. "Keep it, honey," she said, her eyes filled with warmth. "Use it to remind yourself of your strength and start anew." Maya's simple act of humanity, her willingness to help a stranger in need, filled me with a renewed sense of hope. As I climbed into Sarah's car, I knew I was leaving behind more than just a dangerous situation. I was leaving behind the fear and self-doubt that had held me captive for so long. "Tiff," Sarah said, her voice firm as we drove away, "it's time you fought back." "But how?" I murmured, feeling overwhelmed and powerless. "He has all the money, all the connections. No one will believe me." "Not everyone," Sarah countered. "I know someone who works in television. It's time the world heard your story." The next few days were a blur. Sarah's contact, a TV producer, arranged for me to appear on a popular talk show. Standing under the bright studio lights, I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with terror. The host, a kind woman with compassionate eyes, welcomed me warmly. "Tiff, thank you for joining us today. Can you share your story with our viewers?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted my ordeal. I spoke of the emotional abuse, the manipulation, the constant fear, and the night David abandoned me in a dangerous neighborhood. The audience gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and empathy. "Why speak out now?" the host asked gently. "Because silence isn't an option anymore," I declared, my voice gaining strength with every word. "There are countless women out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone. I want them to know they're not." As the show ended, my phone exploded with messages. My story had resonated with people across the country. Women reached out to share their own experiences, thanking me for giving them the courage to speak up. But amidst the outpouring of support, one message stood out, chilling me to the bone. It was from David. "You'll regret this, you lying scum. I'll destroy you." Shaking, I showed the message to Sarah. Her eyes blazed with anger. "He's just sealed his fate," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We've got him now." Leaving the studio, I knew I was heading towards a major confrontation, but for the first time in years, I felt armed and ready. In the days that followed, my life became a whirlwind of interviews, legal consultations, and meetings with women's rights organizations. David's threats continued, but with each one, my resolve grew stronger. Then, one morning, I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this Tiff?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Emily Carter. I'm a family lawyer, and I want to offer you my services." "I appreciate that, but I can't afford a lawyer." I hesitated. "You misunderstand," Emily interjected. "My firm will represent you pro bono. We've been looking for a way to challenge David for a long time. Your case might be the key." It turned out David had made many enemies over the years. Emily's firm had represented several people who had unfairly lost cases against him under dubious circumstances. They saw my case as an opportunity to not only help me, but also to expose David's unethical practices. The divorce proceedings were brutal. David, with his expensive lawyers, painted me as an unstable, alcoholic wife, trying to tarnish his reputation for financial gain. His mother testified against me, tearfully recounting fabricated instances of my supposed drunken behavior. But Emily was a force to be reckoned with. She played David's abusive recordings, presented his threatening messages, and meticulously outlined his pattern of manipulative behavior. She called Sarah and Maya to the stand, their testimonies corroborating my story. The turning point came when Emily presented a toxicology report. "Your Honor," she announced, "we had Mrs. Peterson's hair analyzed for long-term drug exposure. The results indicate the presence of sedatives, consistent with her claims of being drugged by Mr. Peterson." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. David jumped to his feet, shouting denials, but the judge sternly silenced him. The evidence was overwhelming. After a tense deliberation, the judge ruled in my favor. David was ordered to pay alimony, forfeit half of our assets, and cover all legal expenses. He was also issued a restraining order, forbidding him from contacting me. Tears of relief streamed down my face as the weight of years of oppression lifted. I was free. Life after the divorce was a mixture of healing and rebuilding. I moved into a small apartment, found a job at a local women's shelter, and started using my experience to help others. David's harassment continued for a while, but with the restraining order in place and my newfound confidence, I was no longer afraid of him. One evening, while having coffee with Sarah, I shared my concerns about David's continued attempts to intimidate me. "He won't stop, will he?" I sighed. "No," Sarah agreed, "but you can fight back." And fight back I did. Remembering that David had never bothered to change the passwords for his social media accounts, I took control of his online presence. I posted court documents, recordings, and my own account of the abuse I had endured. The public backlash was swift and devastating. David lost his job, his reputation lay in tatters, and his clients abandoned him. When he discovered what I had done, he showed up at my apartment, furious and threatening, but I was ready for him. I called the police, and with the evidence of his harassment and violation of the restraining order, he was arrested. As I watched him being led away, I felt a pang of sadness for the man I once loved, the man who had become consumed by his own arrogance and cruelty, but I also felt a surge of empowerment. I had taken back my life, and I was finally free to live it on my own terms. My journey from victim to survivor became a source of inspiration for others. I shared my story at conferences, universities, and support groups, empowering women to break free from abusive relationships. I even wrote a book about my experiences, which became a bestseller, further amplifying my message of hope and resilience. The woman who once cowered in fear, was now a beacon of strength, a voice for the voiceless. And as I continued to help others find their own paths to freedom, I knew that my own journey of healing and empowerment was far from over. Story 2. My name is Quinn, and I would want to tell you about how my life started off so beautifully before changing in unexpected ways. Kevin, my spouse, was a laid-back man who inherited his father's charming Italian eatery. My grandma left me a comfortable home, which we occupied. We started our family here with the arrival of our son, Frank. When Frank was sleeping in the early years, Kevin and I would spend the nights on our back porch. Together, we would fantasize about our future, maybe having another kid or saving money for a larger home. Every time Kevin imagined it, he held a drink. As I considered providing Frank with the greatest education possible, I hoped he would be able to go to college without having to worry about student debt as I had. It was an easy and happy life, but as my career progressed, Kevin appeared content to keep things the same at the restaurant. Although it struggled to generate enough income, it stayed comfortable. I brought up the topic of improving the restaurant one evening while tidying up after supper. Have you thought about updating the menu or introducing new things to attract more consumers, Kevin? Why fix what isn't broken? I questioned Kevin, cleaning a dish a little too hard. He answered apathetically, "We could be doing so much better, but we're doing well." Drying my hands with a towel, I retorted. Kevin forcefully put down the dish. "It's clear that you're frustrated. Why do you push all the time? Just be content with what we have, please. I'm fed up with your constant desire for more." "Oh," he said. I ended the chat, but when I turned into the orthodontist, the problem wasn't limited to the restaurant. The tension increased. Kevin stayed at the restaurant for additional days, just being away from home, not actually working. And after spending another evening at his mother's, he would frequently find himself at his mother Anna's place the next day. I went up to him. "Last night, Kevin, you hurried to your mother's house once more while you were there. Who do you suppose is in charge of everything here?" I inquired. He threw his keys on the table and rolled his eyes. "Adam, please get off." He shot back. "Mom knows me and she doesn't bug me about money or working more." That was painful, particularly considering that I had been making up for his deficiencies and even giving Anna $900 a month to support her. It was getting more and harder to keep track of all our costs and invoices. I phoned Anna later that week to let her know that we were having financial difficulties and that Kevin needed to put in more money. "Anna, Kevin needs to take the lead, but I'm doing what I can." "We're having trouble," I said. Anna felt defensive instead of comprehending. "You're his wife, Quinn. Supporting him, not shoving him around, is your responsibility. You're constantly trying to get my boy to change. Do you not realize that you are the issue?" She made the accusation. I felt a wave of anger. "Anna, I'm on his side, more than you realize. Every month I even send you money. How do you think I'm the issue? Are you referring to me as a gold digger? I'm responsible for keeping us afloat by counting every dime." Her comments hurt, so I answered. And then she hung up. I thought about our chat as darkness fell. We were both dismayed and frustrated by the direction our lives had taken. I saw Kevin sag into the couch, engrossed on his phone and holding a drink. As I put Frank into bed, I was still troubled by the talk he had had with his mother that day. Since Kevin's restaurant failed, life at home has been harder and harder. He had been forced to fire his employees one by one until he was the only one left in a quiet area of town preparing pizzas. Even yet, the company's revenue declined to the point that it was unable to maintain operations. He looked very devastated when he got home from the day he permanently shuttered the eatery, but his eyes had a glimmer of defiance. And it doesn't end here. He tried to remain calm as he hung up his apron for the final time and stated, "It's just a setback." With invoices strewn about like a spread of sinister cards, I sat at the kitchen table. "Kevin, a setback. The eatery is closed." I answered, "We need a new source of income, and we need it now." He became irritable once his pride was damaged. "I will not accept any job, but I will find anything. My standards are set. I owned my own company. Now, Kevin, what does that mean?" "Standards are not what we need. We need real money." I retorted. My annoyance boiled over. He muttered something about not becoming a desk jockey and simply shook his head. Quinn, I have a degree. Nothing less than a supervisory position is my goal. His boldness astounded me. Your company just collapsed, and you believe that's enough to get you a top job? Unable to hide the annoyance in my voice, I snapped. He didn't answer, simply bounded out, probably going to his mom's house. That's how it happened. Now, Kevin vanished whenever things became difficult. There was no respite over the weekend. Anna, his mother, interrupted with her requests. I had just finished making lunch when she came. Her timing was as perfect as her boldness. You should speak with your superiors, Quinn. Get Kevin a decent job at your organization. He is deserving. As if that were the easiest thing to do, she insisted. I gave a brief, bitter chuckle. Anna, it doesn't operate that way. I worked my way up, starting at the bottom. Top positions aren't given out just because I ask. Her lips thinned, and her eyes narrowed. You simply do not want him to be successful. Worried that he will eclipse you? Despite the growing stress, I explained gently. Really, Anna, it is not possible for Kevin to assume a senior position without any prior experience. Fear is not the issue. It has to do with reality. Under a shroud of chilliness, lunch went on. Kevin, quiet. Probably thinking about his mother's remarks and his hurt ego. As I handled work-related household duties and took care of our kid, Frank, Kevin's days became a fog of inactivity as he relaxed with his phone and beer. Every night when I got home, the house was in disarray and there was no meal. At least get supper started, Kevin. I'm exhausted right now. I would suggest to kick off my shoes and dump my baggage. He would moan while staring at his phone. You're better at it. Just like you, I'm exhausted. I was annoyed by his lack of activity, especially when Frank would tug at my sleeve while he was hungry and anticipating something. Did you pick up Kevin from school today too? I asked Kevin if there was anything he had neglected to tell me one evening, knowing the answer beforehand. He mumbled something in response, barely heard over the TV. Fortunately, Kevin had started to disregard even his most basic responsibilities, so my mother, who lived nearby, had stepped in as a trustworthy backup. He's also your son, Kevin. You are needed by him, I said, finding it difficult to maintain a composed tone of voice. Usually, he would depart at this point, slamming the door behind him, signaling the start of another ordinary day. As expected, he disappeared, leaving me to do everything by myself. When I discovered that money was missing from my wallet, the trend intensified. It was only a few bucks at first, but soon whole notes were gone. I approached him one evening after verifying the missing funds. Have you been stealing cash from my pocketbook, Kevin? His gaze flicked aside and then returned to me. He said he needed some money for drinks. Beer. Now you're stealing money like a criminal, I cried out. You have no right to brand me a thief. He shot back, his voice rising. I'm your husband. Anna interrupted us before we could continue our argument. She had apparently heard us. Her face? Quinn stormy. Money is all that matters to you. Do you not notice that the man is having difficulty? Instead of blaming him, you ought to be on his side. Allow him to take from me to show your support. How about Frank? How about our bills? I said, raising my voice as the tension from the previous several months boiled over. As Anna and I quarreled over him, Kevin fell back on the couch and stopped paying attention. He stared at something far away. After Anna stormed out, and Kevin remained mute and uninvolved, the dispute ended in a heavy stillness. Frank's fever spiked one night as the summer came to a close. Cool or calming cloths did not appear to be helpful. With each beep indicating the temperature wasn't going down, I sat next to his bed with a thermometer in hand and felt my heart sink. Kevin was of no assistance as usual. He was on the couch, absorbed in his phone. Could you see if we have any more fever reducer, Kevin? I inquired, attempting to maintain composure. I knew it would be faster if I did it myself, but he moaned and slowly stood up. Following a brief kiss on his forehead, Frank was moaning gently and holding on to my hand, savoring every second. The following morning, I hurried to the kitchen myself. The doctor emphasized the need of testing and treatment. He noted his suggestions and said it was better to be safe. Tests resulted in considerably higher costs than what remained after paying the bills and Kevin's unrestrained spending. My heart is racing. I moved the $900 that was typically set aside for Anna, as well as the remainder of our money for Frank's care. There was no other option. As soon as I made the choice, Anna barged in, enraged. "Where's my money, Quinn?" She insisted that it be the first of the month. I was getting ready for another doctor's appointment by repackaging Frank's little rucksack. "Anna?" I started, preparing for another altercation. I was responsible for allocating the monies for Frank. They are necessary for his medical exams and treatment since he is really sick. Anna's lips pressed into a thin line of disgust as her eyes tightened. "Do you honestly think I'll think you have no other sources of income?" "Quinn, that was my money," she said. "I need it." With my mother instinct taking over, I stepped back and raised my hands defensively. "My top focus is Frank. He's only a kid. He needs his mother to take care of him since he is ill. My apologies for prioritizing him. I should have known, I suppose. This is what you do. Keeping money for myself." As though the words were poison that hurt her, Anna spat them out with hate for that boy. "Her grandson is that boy. Anna, how could you be so callous?" Wearing thin, I flung back my patience. "Quinn, you don't have to lecture me. You'll regret it if you don't pay me by tomorrow." Her face twisted in wrath as she hissed. Although her menace hung ominously in the air, I was strengthened by the image of Frank, frail and vulnerable, in the adjacent room. "Anna, get out of my house now. I refuse to put up with threats in my own home. Never, ever today." Anna appeared ready to fight further, but she was silenced by the unwavering resolution in my eyes. There was a heavy quiet as she slammed the door behind her and stormed away. Kevin followed her out in silence. I returned to Frank and gave him a gentle pat on the hair, my hands shaking. His eyes were filled with grief and trust as he gazed up at me. "It's all right, sweetie. Mom is present." I kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'm getting more determined." Sleepless nights and hospital visits turned the days into a blur. It was a silent relief that Kevin was not there. No more snide looks or arguments. However, after a week of tense silence, I realized something wasn't right. I was looking at my bank app one Monday afternoon. When I discovered that significant withdrawals had almost depleted our savings, my heart fell. My chest tightened in panic as I looked over the transaction history. A betrayal occurs with each withdrawal. It was pointless to call Kevin. It had been days since he responded. To stop him from stealing, I resolutely blocked the card. In the midst of the chaos, I became acutely aware of Kevin's selfishness. Kevin reappeared a week after his disappearance. With Anna by his side, not by himself. They discovered me on the floor of the living room, surrounded by toys, Franks, and medical bills. "Quinn, we have news," Kevin declared, a strange smirk on his face. "I won the lottery $27 million, and no, you won't see a cent of it. I'm filing for divorce." The room seemed to spin. "How about Frank?" I managed to utter. Anna's laugh was chilling. "Oh, Quinn, always the martyr. You've underestimated my son for too long. Now he's wealthy and you're nothing. He'll find someone better, someone younger." Kevin nodded, picking up a duffel bag by the door. "Yes, I'm moving out to live with Mom. You'll manage on your own, won't you?" Anna was exceptionally skilled at manipulation, wrapping her arm around Kevin and leading him to the exit. "Let's leave the gold digger to wallow in her chaos. We have far better places to be," she suggested smugly as the door slammed shut behind them. The reality of the moment struck me hard. Betrayal, abandonment, theft. Kevin had deserted me, leaving behind only heartache and immense challenges. Yet as the initial shock began to subside, a fiery determination started to grow within me. They thought they could destroy me, render me broken and penniless. I was resolved not to let that happen with a steady voice. I called my lawyer. Kevin used our shared funds to purchase that lottery ticket. "I want to contest the winnings," I declared. My lawyer, though cautious, was supportive. "It's going to be a tough battle, Quinn, but we'll put our all into this," he assured me. Hanging up the phone, I felt the weight of the upcoming struggle settle on my shoulders. Yet there was a newfound strength in me, tempered by this betrayal for myself, for our son, Frank. I was ready to fight. Not just for survival this time, but for justice. As the court hearing neared, my lawyer, Mr. Adam, and I were engulfed in a whirlwind of preparation. We meticulously compiled every shred of evidence, bank statements, financial records, anything that demonstrated how I had financially supported our home. While Kevin contributed nothing. Quinn, it's a solid case. The fact that he used your bank card to buy the lottery ticket is our strongest point, Mr. Adam reassured me as we sat amid stacks of paperwork in his office. With the court date looming, tensions simmered just beneath the surface of my everyday routine. Then, just 4 days before the hearing, Kevin and Anna made an unexpected appearance. I was in the kitchen, Frank playing at my feet when I heard the car door slam. They burst through the front door, their faces red with fury. "You're really going through with this? Suing your own husband?" Kevin bellowed, his voice echoing through the small room. Anna quickly joined in, her tone sharp and spiteful. "Greedy. That's what you are trying to claim. What isn't yours?" I stood firm, feeling Frank press against my leg for comfort. "It's not just Kevin's money. He bought the ticket with our joint funds. Funds that I provided because he wasn't contributing." I countered calmly, the anger from their accusations fueling my resolve. Kevin's face contorted with disdain. "It's not about control, Kevin. It's about fairness. You left, remember? You and your mother mocked me. I said I'd be left with nothing." There, shouts could have escalated further, but I was determined not to let that happen in front of Frank. "You need to leave now. We'll settle this in court." I spoke aggressively. Their departure was loud and chaotic, but once they were gone, the house felt somehow clearer, purer. I hugged Frank close, whispering reassurances that everything would be all right. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Kevin sat across from us, his lawyer whispering in his ear, while Anna glared at me with hostility. When Mr. Adam presented the bank statements and financial records, the evidence was undeniable. Each time, Kevin's attorney stumbled over a question. I felt the wave of triumph. The judge paid close attention. His gaze fixed on Kevin as evidence of Kevin's financial reliance on me unfolded. He to the case was the lottery ticket bought with money from our joint account, making it a marital asset. As Mr. Adam persuasively argued, Kevin raised his voice in the hushed courtroom. I was the one who bought the ticket. It was my decision, my luck. But the judge quickly retorted, "Not your money, Mr. Thompson. And unfortunately for you, luck does not supersede the law." After prolonged deliberations, the judge handed down his decision. It was clear from the presented evidence that Mr. Thompson was financially dependent on Mrs. Thompson during the purchase of the ticket, thereby deeming the ticket a marital asset. The judgment awarded 4/4 of the lottery winnings to Mrs. Thompson and 1/4 to Mr. Thompson. Both Kevin and Anna were visibly shocked, their faces a canvas of disbelief. Months later, after the dust settled and the divorce was finalized, I began to embrace a brighter future shaped by the court's decision. Aware of the tales of lottery winners who squandered their fortunes, I reached out to Ethan, an old college friend who had found success in finance, for guidance over coffee. We discussed strategic investments in technology and renewable energy, as well as setting aside funds for my son Frank's education. Ethan's advice proved invaluable. Meanwhile, Kevin and Anna's approach to their share of the winnings became town gossip. Kevin flaunted a new sports automobile, while Anna indulged in extravagant jewelry and clothes, relishing in her newfound lifestyle. One afternoon, when picking up Frank from school, a buddy gleefully shared the latest about Kevin's lavish purchases and Anna's opulent living. I only smiled and moved my focus back to Frank and our future at home. I painstakingly organized our finances with Ethan's guidance. Each financial decision reinforced a road toward stability and security, assuring Frank would have every potential benefit. One evening, Frank's curiosity about college echoed my expectations for him. His eyes alight with hopes and possibilities as our lives fell into a reassuring rhythm, with Frank excelling in school and our investments blossoming. The past seemed securely behind us, yet life has a way of returning us. As I soon learned through an unnerving update from a close friend during a relaxing coffee session, I discussed with Quinn about some unexpected news. Kevin had fallen on hard times. He lost his automobile's money and was caught up in gambling debts so severe that they even harmed his neck. Over my coffee, I masked my amazement. "Really? That's unfortunate," I said. And then there was Anna. She had started to sell her jewels, desperate as both Sarah and Kevin faced their worst days after years of flaunting their money. Quinn, shaking her head in disgust, narrated these happenings. Before long, Kevin came at my doorway, a pale shell of the guy he once was. His fine outfit was gone, replaced by faded pants and a torn jacket. Once glistening with pride, his eyes now showed despair. "Can we discuss, Quinn?" He sounded hoarse, as though he had practiced his appeal a great deal. Despite my hesitation, I moved aside to let him inside the house. We had the home to ourselves while Frank was away with friends, but I wasn't looking forward to a long stay. Kevin wandered across the living room as he walked in. "Quinn, I've lost everything. The automobile, the money. There's nothing left for me. I also miss my family. You are missed." He raised an eyebrow in confession. I gave a doubtful response. "The money was lost by you. Do you miss that?" "No, it goes beyond that. Lately, I've been thinking a lot." "Maybe we could start over," I thought. I could only remember the years of lies and neglect, yet his eyes begged for another chance. I sneered, not so much in amusement as in shock. "Make a fresh start. You depart after putting us through all of this. You want to go back as if nothing happened, so accuse me of being materialistic and wasting your money." He looked away from me, clearly uncomfortable. "Quinn, I'm aware of my serious errors. Now that I genuinely understand it, I'm prepared to make a change," he demanded. "You went because you felt that life would be better without us, Kevin. That showed who you really were. Now that you're alone and broke, all you can do is regret." I spoke in a determined, dejected tone. "Did he take my words to heart? So we don't have any chance?" "Gently," he inquired. "For my own peace, Kevin, I long ago forgiven you. Not so that when you reach your lowest point, you may waltz back into our lives. Frank and I are doing well, and I plan to continue doing so." With a sad heart, I confirmed. He watched him leave with his shoulders down. I felt like a chapter in my life had finally closed. When I picked up Frank later, his laughing filled the van, confirming how wonderful our lives really are. The sincere, priceless love and joy we had together could never be matched by a lottery. Although it hadn't been easy, our journey was entirely our own, overflowing with genuine, incomparable love. Story 3. Charlotte is my name. My mother, Emily, and I grew up in a little apartment on the outskirts of our town. When I was just 5 years old, my father disappeared, leaving me with a hazy recollection and many unsolved problems. Though the anguish in her eyes whenever his name was spoken screamed more than words, my mother never said anything bad about him. Slice. She went above and above to support me when we were alone, frequently working weekends and many shifts. Sometimes I would come home from school to find her dozing off on the couch, still dressed for work, too exhausted to make it to her bed. Although our existence was straightforward and even difficult, love permeated every aspect of it. I became more determined after seeing her sacrifices. While people my age were out having fun, I was determined to achieve and make her pleased. I was engrossed in my studies, resolved to turn things around for us. My efforts were rewarded when I was awarded a scholarship to attend state college to study economics. My mother shed happy tears the day I got the acceptance letter. "You did it, baby," she said, giving me a firm hug. "You'll do amazing things. I simply know it." College was enlightening. It was shocking at first to be around classmates who had lived far more fortunate lives. I didn't let it deter me, though. Rather, it increased my ambition even further. At the ceremony, my mother's applause was the greatest, and I graduated with honors. There was no mistaking the pride in her eyes. We were now seeing the results of our years of diligence and hard work. I was hired by a respectable corporation in the city as an economist after graduating from college. My mother advised me to remember to eat your veggies and to contact me once a week while I was getting ready to relocate. I reassured her that I would make her proud as I held her and smiled. As I tried to demonstrate my ability, City life was a blur of perseverance and hard effort. I frequently worked through the night and got up early the next day. My efforts paid off, and I was given a big promotion within 3 years. When I broke the news to my colleague Michael, he cried out, "Holy Charlotte, we must rejoice. Tonight, I'll buy you drinks." In the middle of the boisterous music and flowing drinks at Michael's favorite pub that evening, I caught sight of a tall, dark-haired man who had a mesmerizing smile. After our eyes locked, he came up to me. "My name is Liam Montclair." After he introduced himself, the evening was filled with laughing and animated talk. After 7 months, we were inseparable, and I was utterly enamored. Everything changed on a cool autumn evening when Liam Montclair said that my life's path from a difficult upbringing to intensely joyful occasions had molded me into the person I am now. Additionally, I was anticipating my future with Liam Montclair. I was aware that my earlier struggles and victories had equipped me for this new phase. We were surrounded by trees, wearing bright red and gold outfits, at the park where Liam Montclair and I had gone on our 3rd date. He put the dazzling diamond that must have cost a considerable fortune on my finger as the engagement ring. I felt like the main character in a fairy tale, but I had no idea that our story would soon take a surprising turn. Liam Montclair said it was time for me to meet his parents a week later. He stated they can't wait to meet you. However, there was a tinge of discomfort in his smile. When we arrived into the driveway of a large estate with a well-kept lawn and many luxury cars, a blatant indication of old, substantial wealth, my doubts intensified. "Do your folks reside here?" My question was hardly audible above a whisper. With a simple nod, Liam Montclair ushered me to the front door, which opened to reveal an elderly couple who appeared to have been featured in a high society magazine. "Charlotte, Jackson and Madison are my parents," introducing Liam Montclair. Inside the estate, which resembled a museum with precious artwork, ancient furnishings, and many paintings of stern-faced men and women dressed in ornate, vintage clothing, they greeted me with courteous grins that had a faint French accent. Madison clarified, pointing to a particularly ominous image of a guy who served as a count in the royal court. "Our ancestors." After the announcement of dinner, we were brought to a dining room that might have accommodated 18 people. As the first meal arrived, I sat down, feeling overwhelmed by the assortment of cutlery before me. Uncertain of which fork to utilize, I paused. I took Liam Montclair's subtle hint and pointed to the outermost one. Throughout the lunch, I felt very uncomfortable and could sense Madison's and Jackson's eyes on me, their hardly disguised contempt in their eyes. Never in my life have I felt so unworthy. As the main meal is served, Madison's sharp eyes were fixed on me, thus. "Saccharine sweetness," Charlotte said. "Describe your family to us. What do your folks do?" My cheeks flushed with shame as I swallowed hard. It was my mother who raised me. I was able to mention that she works as a waiter. "What about your dad?" Jackson spoke up. He arched an eyebrow. "When I was 3 years old, he departed," I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. "I don't remember him." The ensuing hush was oppressive. Madison's chair clattered noisily on the floor as she abruptly stood up. "This is not acceptable," she said in a furious accent. "You cannot be serious about this girl, Leah Montclair, my love." "Please, mother." Madison interrupted Leah Montclair as he began. "Our ancestry is Old French. We need to maintain our reputation," she said. "We cannot let our only son marry someone who doesn't have the right pedigree or lineage." Jackson gave a nod of assent. "Yes, we do expect our son to wed someone of equal status, someone who can trace at least the 7th generation of their ancestry." "Cold," he said. I was totally unprepared and sat there with my mouth open. "I am aware of my mother's parents' names." I began, but the pressure of their expectations made the words seem empty. As the evening went on, I came to see that the idyllic engagement was being eclipsed by a harsh reality in which love was determined not only by the heart, but also by heritage and tradition. But even though Jackson rolled his eyes so dramatically, I was afraid they might separate. It was obvious that he had neither respect nor admiration for his ancestry. Enough, said Liam Montclair, cutting through the dense tension. "Charlotte is kind, smart, and hardworking. I want to marry her because I love her. Your consent is not required." His words made me feel warm, but Madison's cold response soon took that warmth away. She sneered, "Oh, you'll marry her all right." "However, only if she agrees to our terms," I echoed weakly. Jackson's eyes were sharp as he leaned closer. "You have to adjust if you want to be a part of this family. You'll study our traditions, abide by our laws, and work to maintain our social standing. Does that make sense?" I looked to Liam Montclair for comfort, and he gave me an encouraging nod. "It's not as horrible as it appears, Charlotte. They only want what's best for us." My brain was reeling. This was hardly the engagement announcement I had envisioned. Yet, because of my love for Liam Montclair, I vowed to make it work. Reluctantly, I nodded. "I understand. I'll do my best." Madison's grin was icy and insincere. "Excellent. Start by familiarizing yourself with the history of our great French forebears. It's crucial to respect your roots," she remarked. I suppressed a response. My upbringing was humble and nurtured by a dedicated mother who had given her all for me. Rather of saying this out loud, I just nodded one more. The weeks that followed were a haze of unrelenting demands. My in-laws weren't satisfied with just learning about the past. They determined that I needed manners, elegance, and a complete makeover, Madison said as he pushed a pile of pamphlets into my grasp. "To fit in with our circle, you'll need these." As a result, I worked a full-time job and spent my weekends and nights studying how to use 15 various kinds of forks, how to curtsy properly, and how to execute the intricate movements of a waltz. Keep your chin up and your back straight. As I stumbled through another routine, trying to be as graceful as a lady in society, the dancing instructor gave me instructions. Every night, emotionally and physically exhausted from the numerous laws and procedures, I return home and face my wedding planner, overwhelmed by the plethora of unfinished business. It buzzed on my phone. "Mom, once more." I inhaled deeply, before seeming to be enthusiastic in my response. "Hello, Mother. Everything is fantastic. Everything is going according to plan for the wedding." "That's fantastic, my love." She spoke with pride in her voice. "Meeting Liam Montclair and his family excites me." "Have you already made plans for dinner?" I'm crying as I go back to my recent conversation with Liam Montclair, in which he ruled out the possibility of getting to know my mother before the wedding. I got a weird one. "Not quite yet. Mom, everyone is simply really busy, but I swear, soon." At another awkward family dinner the next evening, I gingerly offered that perhaps we might all have supper with my mother soon. She can't wait to meet them all. The hush that followed was oppressive, until Madison snorted. Her laugh was piercing and contemptuous. "And how exactly do you see this meeting taking place?" Madison inquired in a scornful tone. Charlotte was interrupted by Jackson, who appeared to be instructing a youngster while displaying condescending patience. "You must understand, surely, we belong to quite different social groups. We're not really used to interacting with waitresses." My cheeks became scarlet as a feeling of guilt and rage swept over me. How could they so ruthlessly denigrate my mother, as though her life's labor was worthless? None of them were as valuable as she was. I wanted to strike back, to protect her honor. But under the table, Liam Montclair's hand gripped me more tightly. "Give it up," he whispered softly. "Avoid arguing. It's not worthwhile." I bit down till I tasted blood, clenching my jaw. The unfairness of it all is still bothering me. Liam Montclair was adored by me, sure, but at what price? It felt just incorrect. I realized how much of myself I was giving up that night as I lay awake and irritated. With every suppressed viewpoint, every required etiquette lesson, they both told my mother lies. Parts of the genuine Charlotte were being eroded by me. After months of preparation, I wore my bridal gown on our wedding day. I gazed into the mirror at an unfamiliar face. All Madison and Jackson wanted was the lady staring back. Polished, written, perfect. "Honey, you look amazing." As she fixed my veil, my mother spoke, her eyes wet. Her speech was full of pride, but I felt sick to my stomach. "Thank you, Mother. I suppose I'm simply anxious." She squeezed my hand reassuringly. Everything will work out. She calmed, unaware of the situation's actuality. The ceremony went fairly quickly, faces that blend together. Elite judges, lawmakers, and CEOs from the city crowded the Liam Montclair side of the venue. With just my mother and a few college pals, my side appeared to be little. I soon discovered that this was not the happy party I had imagined when the reception got underway. With their distinguished visitors and myself in the midst, Madison and Jackson basked in the spotlight. Seems to have been reduced to the position of server Charlotte Darling. Madison's voice was brimming with fake sweetness as she cooed, "Bring us some champagne, please." And the little crab cakes froze in disbelief. It was unbelievable to me that this was taking place on my wedding day. The work continued. Serving snacks and drinks while avoiding tripping in my gown, I hurried between tables for the next hour. Every step became more burdensome as I was followed by Liam Montclair's family's sneers and whispers. Liam Montclair was not there, probably mingling with guests, and I was on the verge of tears by the time I made it back to my seat. In the hopes that things would get better after the ceremony, I comforted myself. I reasoned that they must begin to treat me like family. Madison's voice, however, broke through the reception noise. Charlotte, as the new daughter-in-law of Delroy, she made sure the room heard her announcement. Serving our table for the evening is our responsibility. Ultimately, the most significant visitors are present. Something broke inside of me. Frustration and humiliation that had been repressed for months erupted. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I won't. I'm getting married today. For that, there are waiters." I shot back, my voice resonating in the abrupt silence that descended upon the room. Madison's face contorted into an angry mask. "You dare." Her voice was roiling with disdain as she hissed, "You'll follow instructions. Additionally, keep in mind where you are. You're an unappreciative upstart. It is not your place to disobey me." I turned away to find Liam Montclair, and as I did, I struggled with feelings of humiliation, anger, and a woman of distinguished lineage. He was laughing merrily with a group of his college pals when I saw him at the bar. He held a champagne flute in his hand. "Montclair? Liam." I tightened my grip on his arm and hissed, "We must now speak." His eyes were clouded as he gazed at me. "Babe, what's wrong? Is it possible to wait? I'm in the midst of something right now." I pulled him to a more peaceful corner, my hands trembling. "At our wedding, your mother is treating me like a servant, and here you are laughing and drinking as if nothing is wrong." Liam Montclair's expression darkened with irritation. "Are you serious right now? You're bothering me over this. Trivialities." I stared at him, disbelief etching my features. Triviality. Liam Montclair. "They're humiliating me in front of everyone." He rolled his eyes, swaying slightly. "Oh, come on. Just do what they ask. It's not really important. You should be grateful they're even letting you into the family." "Grateful," I echoed, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Yeah, grateful." He smirked, his arrogance clear. "You think I didn't have other options? Prettier, richer girls from good families. I chose you, Charlotte. The least you could do is try to fit in." His words struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, feeling the ground shift beneath me. The man before me was not the Liam Montclair I thought I knew, not the man I had agreed to marry. "It's almost time for the ceremony," he said, checking his watch dismissively. "Pull yourself together and let's get this over with." As he walked away, I stood frozen, tears welling in my eyes, threatening to spill. Everything was so wrong. Charlotte's. My mom's voice cut through my turmoil. "Honey, what's wrong?" I turned to her, the concern in her eyes unleashing my tears. She enveloped me in a hug. "Oh, sweetie," she murmured, stroking my hair. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Between sobbing, I told her everything. The deterioration, Liam Montclair's nasty words, the months of attempting to alter myself, to fit into a world that obviously didn't want me. Mom listened closely. Her look grew grimmer with each syllable. When I finished, she held me at arm's length, her eyes penetrating. "Charlotte," she said, her voice calm yet forceful. "Do you genuinely adore Liam Montclair? Do you want to marry him?" 7 months ago, I would have answered without hesitation. But now, with a terrible realization, I gently shook my head. "No," I muttered. "No, I don't." Mom nodded, a determined look on her face. "Let's put a stop to this charade then." She stormed over to the DJ booth and grabbed the microphone before I could reply. Everyone's attention was drawn to her by the feedback's shriek. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said in a firm, authoritative voice, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a crucial announcement to make. A small fact that must be spoken. Madison and Jackson, sitting with frozen champagne flutes stopped in midair, caught her attention. Uncomfortably, the room became quiet. You could feel the stress," Mom went on, her voice resonating across the still room. Madison Jackson. Madison and Jackson, perhaps? In sharp contrast to the self-assured scowl she had worn minutes earlier, Madison's face was devoid of color. My mother's laugh was harsh and vicious as Madison stumbled, her normally perfect French accent faltering as Jackson's cheeks went a bright shade of crimson. "Slice the tensor out." "Oh, Madison, hurry up. Do you remember Emily Thompson, a former student from Brookfield High School's illustrious class of '80? As the realization became clear, whispers and murmurs spread across the gathered audience. "Everyone, you're correct," Mom went on, picking up speed. "The ostensibly dignified Montclair, your honored host tonight, is about as French as apple pie. In our charming small town, Madison was just another student. Jackson was the next-door youngster from the wrong side of the tracks. As their meticulously constructed identities unraveled in front of everyone's eyes, Madison and Jackson appeared to deflate in their chairs, and I watched with fascination. When I heard their voices, I knew it was them." With a wink at me, Mom disclosed. "However, I have to concede that the French accent is a novel twist." She stopped to allow the truth of her statement to set in. "I picked that up after we all moved to the city, aiming to make it big. Isn't it funny? I remained loyal to myself, continued to be a typical lady. Here, however, Madison and Jackson rebranded themselves as French aristocrats. As the visitors processed the reality of the Montclair's fake grandeur, laughter and startled murmurs filled the room. "What's the kicker, you know?" The mumbling was cut short by Mom's voice. In order to move up the social scale, these folks made up their whole history and lied about where they came from. They had the audacity to treat my kid as though she were beneath them and to look down on her. "There's nothing noble about lying," she said, turning to the audience, her eyes burning with outrage. "Treating people like dirt is not a sign of high status. The actions of individuals who act superior to the rest of us are the only thing beneath everyone here." Her statements were followed by a deep stillness. Slowly, the visitors turned to face Jackson and Madison. Their once adoring gazes have now been replaced with disdain and disgust at their falsehoods. Jackson and Madison's fake French accents broke down into their authentic Midwestern twangs as they scrambled for answers. "Don't believe it," Madison begged. She lost the pretense in her voice. "All we wanted was a better life for our son." With an accent that betrays more of his lowly origins than any chateau dream, Jackson said in desperation, "You're not aware of the demands of high society." The guests, many of whom had held the Montclair in high regard for years, looked aside in contempt, so their cries were ignored. Liam Montclair rushed up to me amid the commotion, his face twisted in rage. He pointed accusingly at me and spat. "You. Everything is damaged by you. My life. The reputation of my family. You are the reason it's all ruined." I felt a sense of comfort as I gazed at the man I believed to be my love. No suffering, no remorse, just a deep reprieve from the comedy. I inhaled deeply before turning to face the crowded reception area. "Everyone, would you kindly give me your attention?" My voice quieted the audience, clear and resonant. "I must make a significant announcement. Today is not going to be a wedding day." Murmurs and gasps swept across the audience. As everyone assimilated the abrupt turn of events, there was a noticeable wave of shock. I went on. "Despite the feelings that are surging all around me, I now acknowledge that I was wrong. I choose someone who feels ashamed of my past and expects me to change every part of who I am to fit in with his world. I'm sorry I almost married someone who used such shallow and dishonest language." With a delicate motion, I lifted my veil and let it fall to the ground. I looked at my mother and nodded, admiration shining on her face. "Mom, let's get home." For the Montclair, once acclaimed pillars of high society, the consequences of that day were swift and catastrophic. Overnight, they were shunned by society. They were abandoned by their ties. Their fair-weather friends stopped inviting them and pretended not to know them at all. When I last heard from them, they had to sell their opulent home and move to a different city in order to avoid the consequences of their uncovered lies. For me, life took surprisingly beautiful turns. I met Lucas a few months after the wedding was called off. Like me, he is from a working-class family and teaches at a nearby high school. I told the Montclair the whole story on our first date. He smiled and remarked, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet there," far from being put off. Since then, we have been together, taking it gradually. His family was real and grounded, and they embraced me without any formalities, etiquette lessons, or lengthy family histories to commit to memory. Just genuine acceptance and kindness. I went back to my old employment, where my honesty and hard work were appreciated. I've become even closer to my mother. In addition to being my mother, she is also my rock and idol. Every day, I make sure she understands how much I value her. Life tends to right itself in a humorous way. When you remain loyal to yourself,